I love this. I got invited to speak here, and I always take a chance to speak anywhere I get invited if I can. And then I prepare for a talk like this with the original theme, and then I try to speak with as many people during the conference as I can to get an idea of what's important right now. And I modify my talk to suit that. So I hopefully was able to do enough of that. But I was working on these slides really till almost the last minute, so there might be some misspellings. Watch for that. Let me know later. And then that will help me improve it for next time. I'm counting on you. I always start with this idea. I don't know if there's any value in you doing the things that I've done, but I like this saying from Peter Block. It's not about the how, it's about the hope. So that's what this is about. I don't believe that I can know your situation well enough to share things with you that will be useful to you. But hopefully it will spark ideas and you'll come up with your own wonderful things. That's what I'm trying to do. I have put down 2 or 3 of the most important points first, rather than at the end, in case I run out of time. So after these first 2 or 3 slides, if you need to go, we're done. All right. So the work that we do requires that we work with others. So let's just get good at that. To me, that's the easiest thing we can do. And if we get good at that, then a lot of the other problems will go away. I'm going to give you a really quick introduction to software teaming. So I called this mob programming because that was the name that was already used for what we did. There was a paper written in 2001 or so that was called Mob Programming and the Transition to XP, and I read that article in 2001 or 2. It was from the Extreme Programming Conference that year. I did not go to that conference, but I read the book, and so I just called it Mob Programming. But over time, it became clear to me that first of all, the word mob to some people has a negative connotation, and the word programming kind of was exclusive. People would come to me and say, oh, I'm a tester, so this isn't for me. I'm not a programmer. Or I'm a product owner, so this isn't for me. So I want to make it clear, it's not just for people who are coding, it's for everybody. So if we're creating software, we can work as a team. How do we go about doing that? I'm only going to give you a really rapid introduction, which we used to call mob programming. Software teaming is all the brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. So it's a very simple idea. You probably know all about it, so I'm not going to go into details on that. If you're trying to take pictures today, you got to go really fast because I'm going to go through these slides extremely quickly. What we're trying to do is gather together all the skills and knowledge we need. And if we can do that, then we can work directly on anything we're going to do from start to finish. Directly. That means we can eliminate most of the queuing. We can eliminate most of the inventory. Maybe we can eliminate all the queuing if we have an ideal team. Let's see if I can get this to work. It's working, right? Can you see it? Okay. There's a tester, a product owner, a coder, a database expert, a coder. We could do all of our work with this team, never having to ask anyone else for information, no help from anyone else. We could deploy our own work. The users could go directly to using it. This is ideal. We don't always get ideal. It can be done remotely as well. So this picture is probably from 2016. That other one was from 2012. These are ancient history pictures, but you can see this can be done in almost any situation. Let's get to the advanced stuff. So just a note of warning, if you're at an Agile conference and the slide deck does not have some kind of a circle in it, it's not really Agile. So watch for the circle. I think I have one in here. We'll see. I try to make sure I get a circle in there so you don't feel cheated. I'm going to cover a couple more of the advanced points that I would normally put at the end, but I want to make sure they're at the beginning so we got them covered. I believe that the people that are doing the work are those who can best figure out how to manage that work. We always have that backwards. The people doing the work, they can figure out how to manage it. We don't need to be managing that for them. Another important thing is the team will figure it out. We've got everybody in software development, whatever they do, they're brilliant people. And they'll figure it out. We don't need to figure it out for them. Every single problem they're going to come upon in how they'll manage the thing, how they'll do the work, how they'll get organized, they'll figure it out. So those are usually what I would put at the very end. Our job is not to control the people or the work or whatever. Our job is to liberate the people. Make it easy for them to do great, to excel in their life and to excel in their work. Can we find a way to do that? That's what I'm inviting us to do. Now we'll go back to my normal talk. First of all, my very first job, I was 12 or 13 years old. I was probably pretty tall by then, but this is what my wife thinks I looked like when I was 12 years old. So she drew this picture for me. So I got a job watering plants in the nursery, and the boss came to me and said, you have two responsibilities. He was the owner of the company. Imagine a 50 or 60-year-old, 55, 60-year-old man talking to a 12, 13-year-old boy. He treated me as an equal. And he said, you have an important job. Your job is to you're going to water the plants. That's your main job. They have thousands of plants in little containers. Your job is to water those plants. You use a wand, and you're very cautious with the water because you don't want to be wasting the water. But your job is not just to keep the plants alive. You want to give them the conditions they need to thrive. That means you need to learn about all the different kinds of plants and their water needs. So you can't just water everything the same. You're going to have to learn a lot. And he gave me a book about plants, and it listed many of the different kinds of plants and general information about horticulture and so on. He said, you need to learn this. So your job is important, and you can learn to do it. He said, but you have a second responsibility. And the second responsibility is you need to be paying attention. And whenever you see something we could do better, come to me and tell me about it, and we'll take action. We'll figure out how to make those improvements as we go. Every day, every week, come to me with your ideas, and we'll use your ideas. Do you see what he's telling me? He's telling me as a young boy that I honor your ideas and I want to hear them, and we're going to use them. He's including me in running the business, and I took that seriously. It ruined me for all jobs after that, because everywhere I worked after that, they never wanted that. They just say, shut up and get back to work. But this man wanted to know, what are my ideas about making improvements? He understood this. Over time, tiny improvements will grow because there's a compounding effect. And I've read this book a few years ago, and in it he had his chart. And it's exactly what Mr. Smith, that was the name of that man who had the nursery, knew. That if we could get a 1% improvement per day, then over 365 days of compounding, we have a 37.7 times increase. If you could do that with your investments, you wouldn't be here today, right? You'd probably be out there on your yacht or something. This is an important thing. Matter of fact, I think Mr. Smith knew this, and he wanted everyone in the company focused on always making things better. Well, of course, being a software developer, I put it into Excel to prove that those numbers were correct, and sure enough, those numbers are correct. I didn't want to tell you something that wasn't true. I don't think we can get a 1% improvement per day. I think it's hard to get a 1% improvement per week or whatever. But the concept is the same. So let's just have a tiny improvements habit. And here I should be able to say, thank you very much, I'm all done. Because this is really the crux of everything else I'm going to share. But there's things that get in our way. And that's what I want to cover now. And it's going to start out kind of light. It will get more and more depressing over time. If I hear you crying, I'll try to lighten it up a little bit. So I always do this exercise everywhere I go. I've probably done it hundreds and hundreds of times now. I will ask, over the last few days, really over the last month or two, what are the things that have happened in your work that have made it difficult for you to get your work done? And let's gather those into some kind of Post-it note thing, right? You do these, you're Agile people. I mean, that's what you do is you use Post-it notes. So this was a group of 20 people. In 3 minutes, they came up with 50 items. Now, you'll recognize a lot of these items. That's not really important what they specifically are. I've made a list of about 200 specific items that are slightly different than each other. But in this one, I'm going to see a couple here. Let's see if my pointer still works. The big ones like context switching, needless meetings, I just say meetings, technical blockers, multitasking, dependencies on others, unclear requirements. These are the things that make it difficult for us to get our work done. What have I learned over time? Is there's a lot of these problems. They stay with us. If I go back to a company a year later, they still have the same problems in the last few weeks or months, and they're everywhere I go. This is really common stuff. I can easily determine the spread of the problems I'm going to see when I go into a company. I will see these things over and over again. So we need to start asking questions when we see that kind of a pattern. Why is it so profuse? Why is it so persistent? Why is it so pervasive? These are the kinds of questions I want to be at least investigating. So in 1999, I worked at a place. We had 200 software developers. I was about 45 years old, and the average programmer was probably 22, 23 years old. So they looked a lot like this. And we'd take on our work to do our iteration. This was before Agile was a thing, but people were starting to experiment with iterations. And at the end of every iteration, we were going to do what we would now call a retrospective. In those days, they called it a lessons learned. So in the first lessons learned, I noticed 3 major problems. Now, I was just one programmer amongst 200 programmers, but I noticed these were the 3 big things that came forward. Our estimates were off, and they weren't really helping us. The requirements weren't well understood, and they kept changing. At the end of the iteration, we had these problems. So now we're going to decide, what are we going to do about it? Well, what are we going to do about it? They thought, well, we need to get better at estimates. We need to get better at understanding the requirements. We need to get better at controlling the changes. Sound typical? I think these are closely related problems. It doesn't matter what the problems were, but the pattern is what I want to talk about now. We went off to do our next iteration. At the end of that second iteration, we did a retrospective. I noticed 3 big problems. What do you think those were? Anybody want to shout it out? Estimates were off. And it's this stuff. We don't need to go into detail. And how are we going to solve it? The exact same way. Let's get better at it. Let's get some training. Let's practice. And let's go back and do some more work. So the third iteration. We charge off, all happy to be working. They weren't completely depressed yet. Charge off and do our work. And then at the end of the iteration, we do our retrospective. What do you think? Yeah, we don't even need to think about it. So I noticed a pattern. And in those days, if we noticed a pattern, we wanted to talk about it, right? We'd give it a name and we'd start talking about it. If we see a pattern, that means something going on over and over again, same cycle. Every iteration, same pattern. We're going to give it a name. And I called this the cycle of continuous no improvements. We don't want that, right? We want the opposite of that. So, if we see something like this over and over, then we need to ask, what's going on here? And I stood up in the meeting and I said, this is what I think is going on. We're looking at symptoms here and not necessarily problems. And that's an important thing. Let me get a tissue here. This is not part of the presentation. I just need a tissue. To me, it's really important to understand when we're looking at symptoms rather than problems. I think all of these things are symptoms of underlying problems. Needless meetings is a symptom of something else. Unclear requirements is a symptom of something else. Almost all of these are symptoms and not problems, and we cannot solve symptoms. What if I have a cold and I have a headache, I'm congested, I have a sore throat? So I take aspirin or something for the headache, I take a decongestant, I take something for the sore throat, and now I feel better, but I still have the cold. But I feel good enough to go to work, so I go to work, and now I give everybody the cold. We didn't solve the problem, we just dealt with some symptoms. What happens when we deal with symptoms is we hide the problem. We no longer need to focus on it. That's just not a good thing to do. So, I think there's a bigger conundrum. Consider this. Can we solve problems? Now, this is something I see over and over again. Often today's solution becomes tomorrow's problem. And if that happens, we didn't really solve anything. We just maybe moved the problem to a different spot. or we made it look different. Now, that doesn't mean that that we will always not be able to solve problems, but this is what I call the problem with problems. It's going to depend on what domain we're in, and we'll come back to domains later. All of you have learned about domains. If you do Agile stuff, you've been in enough conferences, you know all about that, but we'll come back to that later. One specific kind of problem I want to deal with is what I call the misplaced focus of management. Management is focused on solving problems. We have problems, let's solve them. That's the management mind, right? So, one big problem is it's hard to manage things. So what do we want to do? That's an easy solution. We're going to solve for that by making it easy to manage things. Guess what happens? This is a problem. Because of this quote, so much of what we call management consists in making it difficult for people to work. Now, if that's true, we better do something about it. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's nothing I'm telling you today that I think of as truth. It's just things to think about. This quote comes from, supposedly, Peter Drucker. So if you ever find a real reference to him actually saying that, I would love to have it. I'd like to know where this started. Everybody quotes him, but when you track it back, there's no proof that he actually said this. But whether he said it or not, I love this. I'm pointing to my monitor down here. I should be pointing up there, right? So what we can do, here comes the circle, so watch for this. So not much is getting done, and it makes it hard to manage things. So let's make it easy to manage things. But according to Peter Drucker, that's going to make it harder to get the work done. When it's harder to get the work done, well, not much is going to get done. And now we're in a cycle. They call that a vicious cycle. It's going to get harder to manage things. We're going to try to put more management on it. Pretty soon we're going to say, maybe we need waterfall again. Okay. This is an issue, but at least you got your cycle, your circle in the talk, so yay. And so, why do we let this happen? Much of the rest of the talk is about this till we get to a few practical things. Beliefs and biases I want to cover now. You've come to Agile things before. You've learned about these things. But I like this little diagram I'm going to share you I got from Dave Gray. Dave Gray wrote a couple books. One of them was Game Storming. You've probably seen that book. This particular one, he shares this idea about how we come to our beliefs. So a lot of times, what we think is true might not actually be true. So he diagrams this as being reality. That's everything there is. We can't know everything, but we experience some of it. So that's what we get to know about. I should be making sure that these things are matching. They are. The thing is, we can only pay attention to a very little bit. I've read a lot of research lately. I've been studying these things, and we cannot pay attention to very much. Matter of fact, in this talk, you are hearing about 10% of what I say. Shame on you. It's just nature. It's the way it is. You can't hear everything that's being said. It's hard to pay that much focus. Anyways, that's the attention I'm talking about. Upon that small thread of attention we've had, we build our theories, we make our judgments, and it becomes our beliefs. And then we say, hey, this is obvious. Isn't this obvious? But it's not really. But these important things are based on that tiny thread of attention. And I think that's something I want to deal with. So essentially, whenever you see this icon, it kind of means here's the problem. What we believe is based on that thin thread, that very thin thread. So the next issue with this, though, is that we need to have beliefs. Otherwise, we'd spend all of our time making decisions and thinking about things, and our life would get clogged with making simple decisions. So we have beliefs that make it easy for us to get through our day, but they can be very limiting. So we need to pay attention to that, be aware of that, and I will give an example of a limiting belief in a few moments, just to give you one example. But let's talk about biases. Again, you've been coming to conferences like this, you know all about biases. I think there's like 200 biases on this list, and they're subcategorized and categorized. That's a lot of biases to learn about. I looked just a few minutes before I came here, I looked in Google where you can look up, the word usage, and from 1920, there's no one ever talked about biases. About 1920, it started going up the curve. And then 1980, it just shot way up. And it just keeps shooting way up. We're talking about biases all the time. I don't think you could have found this many biases. In 1920, maybe people didn't have biases. I don't know. But anyways, mind the biases, and I'll only talk about one, and you all know this one, confirmation bias. We want to believe the stuff we already believe. We want to confirm that. It makes us feel good, maybe, I don't know what. But we'll have a biased search for information, a biased interpretation or a filter on that information, a biased interpretation of what we find, and a biased memory about what we know. This is not good, because that means we're going to continue to trick ourselves into believing stuff that may not actually be useful to us. It's our nature to want to confirm our belief in the things we already believe in, but maybe worse than that, we're going to confirm the belief in the things we want to have true. We're going to look for the evidence that proves that what we want to have true is true. That's called desirability bias. So here's an example of a bias that limits us. And I love this because everybody has this. We believe we succeeded because we are talented, or we did the right things, or we're brilliant, or something like that. Kahneman, you know Kahneman, he'll tell us a little bit different. Success is talent plus luck. There's talent everywhere. And people have enough luck. We all have jobs, or most of us have jobs. We have companies that are doing okay. We're making enough money, whatever it happens to be. We think that we're succeeding because of our talent plus luck. But he says great success comes from a little more talent and a lot more luck. And if that's true, then most of what we're getting isn't because of our talent, it's because of our luck. It's not because of our brilliance, and we'll put the brilliance in quotes. It's in spite of our brilliance. It's not because we have tons of talent, it's because we were the right people at the right time doing the right thing. Okay. Yeah, this is getting depressing, but there's more depressing stuff coming, so let's move on. So I want to cover the failure to communicate. When I first read the stuff I'm going to give you next, it just clicked in me. It's like, whoa, this is good stuff. I found this, I don't know how long ago. I think this person wrote about this stuff decades ago. But it's called Zuill's Law. So what if this is true? Does anybody know Zuill's Law? Let's see a show of hands. Is anybody still awake out there? Okay, there are a few hands went up. Okay, thank you. Here's the thing. When I first learned about this, it suddenly dawned on me that this is a big part of the reason that communication is not working very good. Here's his fundamental law. Communication usually fails except by accident. Now, sometimes I'll ask the audience, what should we do then? And somebody shouted out, let's have more accidents. I thought, okay, that's not a bad idea. But he's got a few more laws. If communication can fail, it will. If communication cannot fail, yeah, it still most usually fails. What are we going to do? My goodness. If communication seems to succeed in the intended way, there's been a misunderstanding. I like this next one a lot. If you're content with your message, communication certainly has failed. I've gone to meetings where the big boss comes up and gives an announcement, and then they leave. And everybody, as they walk out, they're talking about it, and they all have a different interpretation of what was said. How does that happen? Well, I like these next two. They're really great. These are my favorites, probably. If a message can be interpreted in several ways, it'll be interpreted in the manner that maximizes the damage. Sounds like Twitter, or what they now call X. We used to tweet things, now we excrete things. Okay? I think that's what it is. Did I get that wrong? I think that's correct. There's always someone who knows better than you what you meant with your message. Again, social media. What are we going to do? If this stuff's true, what are we going to do? Just remember, what we think of as truth, our truth, is based on that thin thread. There are many truths out there. We'll come back to how are we going to deal with this, but there's going to be my truth and your truth. And wherever we start at, we better be aware of this. Okay, so we think we're communicating when we're not. I have a whole couple-hour talk that I do on this. If you are bored tonight, give me a call. I'll fill you in. So this is even getting more depressing, so we're going to keep moving on to the next depressing thing. So I want to talk about systems. Now, I would like to think of myself as a systems thinker. And I'm pretty much sure I'm getting there. That I think almost everything that I deal with has something to do with being a system. So what is a system? My quick definition is like a truncated definition. A system is an interconnected and interacting set of elements that achieve something. So we'll use that as the definition. And often when they diagram things, they kind of look like this. I went online. I found this one years ago. Can't quite make out the lines there myself, but this kind of shows a system. So I want to talk a few points about systems. I would like to share a lot more about this because I think this is crucial stuff, but we only have so much time. So this comes from a book by John Gall. A working complex system has invariably evolved from a working simple system. What does that mean? That means we cannot invent complex systems. They have to evolve from a working simple system. We can invent complex systems, but they're not going to work. Well, what are all these systems that we're using trying to do our work? Most of them didn't evolve. They were the creations of somebody saying, oh, I know how to do this. We'll come back to this later again. Another feature or function of systems is they perpetuate themselves. This is critical too. This next bit really clears that up. The idea of making a complex system do just what we want it to do can be achieved temporarily at best. That means it's going to be tricking us into thinking the work we're doing is making improvements, and then we're going to say, let's do more of that. You know that saying, what got you here won't get you there? That's kind of part of this. So how are we going to use this? A system is good at perpetuating itself, and it changes only by evolving, not interventions, not transformations, not adoptions, not manipulations, not changing the constraints, and it won't behave the way we want it to behave. What are we going to do? Now remember, I'm just getting you more and more depressed, so I'm going to stop with the depressing part. I have a lot of hope because I've seen successes in making things better, and now I'm going to share with you some of those things. So here's the review of what we've covered. I'll wait for that to get to the end. That's what we've covered, and we did it pretty quickly. Well, we'll see. We'll see if I can get done with everything in the amount of time we have. And I want to cover the practical stuff. Now, remember where I started. I'm not here to tell you what to do or whether or not you should do something or how to proceed. I'm just sharing some ideas and thoughts, and everything I'm going to share with you is stuff I have real experience with. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. It never means that. So these are the things I want to cover, but we're going to go right to them and not let this. So the first thing I want to talk about is domains. If we understand the domain we're in, we at least have a start. You're all familiar with Kinevin, probably. You've seen these charts. This is sort of the 4 domains and the one in the middle. Real quickly. The clear domain means that you just need to follow the instructions. In this case, this is a can of dough. You open up the can of dough, you take the biscuits, or these are like, we call them biscuits in the U.S. You put them on the cookie pan or whatever, you put them in the oven. You cook them at the degrees they tell you, for the amount of time they tell you, and it always says, or until golden brown, which means you have to pay a little bit of attention. And then you get the biscuits, and they're decent to eat. I like them. And they're hot, and you can put some butter on them, and they're great. But what if you want really, really good biscuits, or I should say croissants, or any kind of pastry? If you're going to make those yourself, you're not going to buy it in a can. You need to know how to do this. And this takes a lot of expertise. You have to be good at what you're doing. You have to pay a lot of attention. But all the unknowns are known. There's nothing in here that we don't know about. We know that the temperature of the oven fluctuates from day to day. Sometimes the eggs are bigger than the other eggs. Sometimes the flour is ground to a finer degree than the others. We need to know all these details, how these materials interact with each other, and we watch it carefully. And we can make all the decisions as we go. No problem. This is a space where we have governing constraints. Before, I think I didn't cover that, we have fixed constraints. Just follow the checklist. You're not even following a recipe. Here you're following a recipe, but it takes skill and knowledge to do it. But let's move into the complex domain. This is molecular gastronomy. It's where they're inventing new textures, new tastes, and different ways. We want to excite the person who's going to eat the food. We're discovering new recipes. When we get into that space, it's a process of discovery. Molecular gastronomy is really totally experimental. You might start off, I'm going to try and make a new dessert, but as you do it, you're going to discover a taste you think would be good as a gravy, or some other purpose. So whatever it is that you're doing, it will change as you go through the process. You don't say, oh, that tastes more like gravy than a dessert, throw it out. We might say, hey, we discovered something new. But there are unknown unknowns. We don't know what the unknowns will be. And there's a lot of domains, or I should say, types of work that are this way. The last thing is, and this has the enabling constraints. We'll go into details of this some other day. I'm trying to stay kind of on schedule. We'll see how it goes. I have till midnight. I don't know how long you have. We could go to midnight, right? Okay, we're good. Then this is the way I cook. This is the chaotic way. My biscuits are burning. You take action, you exercise your fluency, you act, you sense, you respond. You just do. If it looks like a big fire, you yell fire and run out of the house. If it's like a small fire, the way I cook, I always wet down a kitchen towel just before I start cooking. So in case something catches on fire, I can throw it over. That's my fluency, because my food usually ends up looking something like this. And then the family says, oh good, Dad's cooking tonight. We're probably going to go out to dinner later. So they know how that works. I'm not that good with food. But anyway, because normally what will happen is I'll put the stuff in the oven, and then I go in the other room, I start answering emails, and then somebody says, doesn't it smell smoky in here? And I go, oh, I forgot. And it's too late by then. Okay, so this is the issue, or the reason we want to know about this is that the principles that apply and the tactics and techniques that we can use will vary from domain to domain. It's never going to be the same across domains. We want things to be in the complicated or clear domain, but in our work, we're almost always working in the complex domain. So we often don't even understand there are domains and we're not thinking about it, or we don't understand the domain of the problem we're in, or we choose the wrong techniques. So knowing about domains, I think, is useful, and that's something that's helped me a great deal. Let's take a couple steps further. If we understand the domain that we're in, we can start thinking about how are we going to approach this, and here's the big hint. Almost all the work that we do is in the complex domain, because we're working with people, and we're working with inventing things. And if we weren't in those domains, maybe there would be other things we could do. Okay, the next thing I want to talk is about turn up the good. Now, if you remember Mr. Smith, my story at the nursery when I was a boy, I think he understood turning up the good. You're always trying to make improvements, but I want to put a finer point on the idea of what does it mean to turn up the good, and I love this description from Kent Beck. If you haven't read Kent Beck's books, I would suggest you do read them, even if you're not real technical. Read from Kent Beck. He originated a lot of the thinking that's come into the work that we do. This comes right from his first book, the White Book of Explaining, it's called Extreme Programming Explained. That's the green book. There's also one called the White Book. This, I know, is in the foreword or somewhere in that book. I'm going to read it right off so I get it right. When I first articulated XP, I had the mental image of knobs on a control board. That's a musician's control board. Each knob was a practice that I knew from experience worked well. I knew it worked well because I had experience with it. I would turn all the knobs up to 10 and see what happened. This is what he's telling us, because I think this is really important. He had experience with these things. He reflected on them and thought about what's good about them, and let's do an experiment to see if we can make it better. To me, this is turn up the good. This is actually something I really practice a lot. I think it's so important that it allows us to approach those problems in a very different way. So remember this we talked about earlier, and we didn't set out to solve any of these problems. We set out to turn up the good on collaboration. That's what that row of people represents. Are those people? We had experience with collaboration, knew it was good. We reflected on it to talk about what was good about it, and we started talking about what experiments could we do to increase our ability to get good at collaboration. And when we did this, we noticed many of the problems, and I'm putting those in quotes, seemed to fade away when we started turning up the good on collaboration. The better we got at collaboration, the fewer of those symptoms and problems we had. Watch this intricate animation that shows how this works. When we started working as a team, all of these problems faded away. Hey, I didn't hear anybody go, ooh. they faded away. Did you see the fading? Yeah, okay. That took me an hour to figure out how to do. That was 10 years ago. I kind of know how to do that now, but I still like the good feeling that people go, ooh. All right, so this is the power of turning up the good. The issue here is a lot of times we don't know what that good's going to be. We don't know what we're going to get when we turn up the good, but to me that's a power. We're going to discover things we had no way of knowing before we started trying to turn up the good. We didn't realize if we turned up the good on collaboration that all those symptoms and problems would be fading away. We didn't set out to solve any of those. They just disappeared for us, most of them, or they lessened a great deal. I like this saying, comes from Douglas Adams. I may not have gone where I intended to go, but I think I've ended up where I needed to be. I think that's really good. That's the power of turning up the good. So another thing I want to cover is working smarter versus working harder. So I read a paper, I think this came out in about the year 2000. It's starting to be a long time ago. But when I read this clicked with me. I'm going, hey, this is explaining an important thing that I've been noticing. And the paper is easy to get on the internet. You can find it for free. Nobody ever gets credit for solving problems that never happened. This is about creating a sustaining process improvement. This has been around a long time. This is what they talk about, working harder or working smarter. And they use causal loop diagrams to explain it. I won't go into details on this, but what this is telling us is the capability trap. We are so focused on getting the work done we need to get done today that we don't work on making the improvements that we need to make in our process to make it easier to work tomorrow. So it can look like this. The harder we work over time, the less capability we have. Because we're focused on getting the work done, our capability is diminishing. And there's plenty of research that shows that's probably true. They've researched, doctors and lawyers and actuarials and all kinds of judges, all sorts of things. We lose our capabilities over time if we don't focus on improvement. So the amount of effort times our capability gives us how much we're going to get done, and we're going to see that it's always diminishing. If we work smarter, the opposite will happen. We spend more time working on improving our capabilities, then our capability goes up over time, and the amount we can get done goes up over time. One of the problems, though, is working harder at first gets us more return. So we think, oh, let's just work harder. But it's going to be diminishing returns soon. And trying to improve ourselves, our productivity might dip for a little while as we are learning the things we need to learn. And then we think, oh, wait, now we're not getting as much done. Let's go back to working harder instead of working smarter. Okay. This is the idea of temporal discounting. Some of you work in finance and can explain it better than me. But we're preferring the more immediate results over our future benefits. And most organizations are in this. I call this the utilization trap as well. The utilization trap is we got all these people, keep them really busy so we get more done, but now we're going to get less done over time. So the capability trap and the utilization trap kind of go hand in hand. So what I think Sterman and Repenning, who wrote that paper, what they're suggesting is that we can increase our capability and we should spend more time doing that than in doing the work that we're trying to do. If we focus on increasing capability rather than getting our work done, we will get more and more work done over time. We need to get into that cycle, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. I want to deal with the misplaced focus of management. So remember this? So management wants to make it easy to manage things, and that's a backwards way of thinking in my mind. Remember that thing from Peter Drucker? Like so much of what consists of management is making it difficult for people to work. So the more management we apply, the harder it gets to get the work done. So we had that vicious cycle that we saw. So this is really simple. Let's figure out how to make it as easy as possible for everyone to do the best they can do so they can excel in their life and they can excel in their work. Let's find a way to do that. So we end up with this kind of a cycle. Spend time making it easier to do the work. More work gets done because it's easier to do. The performance gap decreases, and it becomes easier to manage things. And now we're in what we would call a virtuous cycle. Let's get the virtuous cycle. There's another circle, by the way. You got two in one talk. Pretty good conference, eh? So what I like to do is optimize for the flow of the work. So we pay attention to the work and we don't optimize for the output of the individual. This isn't about working faster or harder. It's about focusing on a different thing. If the work is flowing through steadily, we're in good shape. If it's not, we need to figure out why. And that has to do with queuing and inventory. We don't have time to cover those things here today. We're not trying to get the most out of each person, which is another misplaced focus of management. We're trying to get the best of each person into everything we do. And we're at the same time trying to make it so they love their work and they love their life. Can we do this? Still, the system resists change, so what are we going to do about that? Now remember, this stuff's all theoretical for me. I've tried these things, I find they work, but nobody has enough time to live to actually try these things enough to know whether they're really useful or not. But I think they kind of are worth thinking about. So back to the systems thing, how are we going to deal with the systems? And I'm going to share an idea that I used in 2011. I got on at a place where we ended up doing mob programming. We started out with a team that wasn't even pair programming, and we started looking for ways to turn up the good on collaboration. And this is how we were able to go about doing that. And I saw this documented in 2013. I don't think that he was aware of what I was talking about. That's what I like about patterns. We can see the same idea showing up in several places. So Michael Sahota wrote about this, and he shows this idea of a culture bubble. And the way I envisioned it for me was, I'm going to have this team I'm going to work with. And to be able to have the experiments we need to have, the rest of the organization we can't let them know what we're attempting to do. So we need adapters. That's what those little icons, I've got to point this way. I don't have a clue now. I'm going to try one more time. I got something going. I want to have a bubble around this team, and I need an adapter that allows the rest of the organization to act with us the way they're used to acting with us. But once we're inside our bubble, we're going to be working in a very different way. So you can see there's a lot of adapters shown there. But I even knew across our department that other teams would need to work with us in the way they were used to working with us. This creates a bubble where we can experiment with things without getting crushed by the organization. I needed to have my boss involved in this. So when they hired me, this is what I told him I wanted to do, and he agreed to it. It was under his umbrella or his bubble that we were able to have this. I knew that over time, other people would become interested in this, and hopefully we could spread it across the whole department. So eventually, our whole department is working in these new ways. It won't be the same from group to group. They'll find their own ways, but we're trying new things. We all have our own bubbles. We're experimenting with better ways of doing things. Now, we didn't get this exactly, but my plan was to reach out across the company and find people who could be compatible with us, who wanted to try the new ways, but also we would be visible enough after a while so some people would get interested. But we were reaching out. I was purposefully reaching out. My idea was we could grow this across the organization in their own different ways. And eventually it would end up something like this, where the whole organization has changed. We didn't change the organization as a whole. We changed little parts of the organization. Now, I don't know if that can ever happen. That was my theory, and I got to get it to about this far. And maybe that's good enough. I don't think it was completely this far, but it was like this. Okay, so how does this happen? We can introduce some kind of a chance for the small systems to get started. That's the experiments. And as they evolve, they could turn into things we want or things we don't want, and we can shut down the things we don't want because they're all quite small. If we allow them to evolve over time, we will get some of those better things that we want to have. And we have to protect this from the outside system because it will crush us. So I'm not suggesting we can do that in every organization. It's just something that I was able to try. I want to get on now to the failure to communicate. So in the failure to communicate, we'll go back to Wheel's laws. You remember that. If communication almost always fails, and it only succeeds because of accidents, what are we going to do about this? Now, when I first learned about this, I didn't know what to do. But my experiments with collaboration showed me this, that if you have your truth and I have my truth, and we start combining our experiences, we can start getting some kind of shared truth. Maybe at first it's my truth plus your truth, but after a while, it's our truth. So if we're working on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, we're going to get a chance to get this. This is pair programming. We're going to get that doubled up attention on the experience we're having, and we can have our truth. What happens when we add people? More views on the same experience, more attention, and a really powerful thing happens. Because we are all paying attention to the same thing, our ability to pay attention grows. And we were getting a lot more attention from many different perspectives, but we were sharing it with each other because we're working on the same thing at the same time. The end result of this for me was we now all have a very much bolder level of attention than we get when we're working alone. Now, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe this is the experience that we were having. When we worked this way, we had continuous alignment, we had continuous feedback, and our understanding grew quickly, and we had a shared understanding. Not necessarily a shared agreement. That comes later. But rather, this is my suggestion, rather than trying to get better at communication, let's get better at collaboration. Let's turn up the good on collaboration. I think the communication comes for free. Now, I don't guarantee that. Give it a try. Last thing I want to cover is leading from within. When I first started working in software development, I love to program. I love to just write code. I like to work alone in my own little space and think about the things. But as I started working in it for a living, every place I worked was, I think, awful. Almost every place. And I didn't want that. And I thought, well, maybe I can make a change. And it turned out I normally couldn't. It took me about 10 years to learn how to get any kind of improvement. But once I started figuring that out, I realized a couple things. The big one was, I have to take action myself. Nobody's coming to save me, right? You have to be your own hero. So we have to take responsibility to make things better. And if we can't make things better where we're at, maybe we go looking for a place where we can make things better. Maybe there's already a place that's exactly what we want. This worked for me. It took a long time, 10 years or so. We need to be our own hero. Another thing is, how do we choose to show up? We get to choose how we're going to be. You can say, okay, I don't think I'm good enough yet, so let me learn to be better, whatever that means. I had to learn how to work well with others, which I wasn't very good at. I had to learn how to listen to their ideas and try their ideas and not insist on my own ideas. And we need to do this in some kind of relaxed and sustainable manner. It means we have to pay sufficient attention and then share the right thing at the right time and in the right way. This is not easy to do because we often want to share too much, or we'll start backing off and not sharing at all. But we need to be ready. We're paying enough attention that when we can help and make a difference, we're ready to do it. We're coming near the end. Not too bad. So remember those first couple slides I showed you? The work that we do requires that we work with other people. There's nobody in any company I've visited in the last 10, 15 years or ever that just purely works alone. They have to communicate nowadays through emails or messaging or phone calls or meetings or documents or something. But since we need to work together somehow, let's get good at it. Let's figure out how to make working good together better. And I think this is pretty much the last thing I want to share. When I was about, 25 or 30 years old, 25, I had there was a guy in the town where I lived who made really elegant lettering. And I was doing lettering for a living. I was designing advertising and signage and actually making signs. And I saw this person's work and I said, that is beautiful work. I want to learn to do that. So I found his phone number and I called him and I said, can I meet you? I love the work that you're doing and I would love to do this elegant lettering that you're doing. And he said, well, come on down. I can't really teach you how to do this lettering. I can show you how I do it, but I have something more important to share with you. So I went and met with him. He lived about 30 miles from me, and he shared this with me. The object isn't to create art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. This is about preparing yourself. And this is the way he explained it to me. I think we still have enough time. This is what he told me. He said there's a squirrel that lives in Siberia. And if an expert brush maker can get the hairs of that squirrel and put them together just the right way and wire them onto a stick to make a brush, and they're very expert at it, and you take that brush and you use it to make letters, that brush will naturally make some very elegant shapes. You cannot force it to make the shapes you want. You have to learn the shapes it makes. And that takes time. Once you learn to do that, you get better at it over time. You can figure out what shapes the brush is good at. Those elegant shapes will become elegant letters. So you don't try to make the elegant letters. You try to learn the system that you're in and how it operates, and let it do what it does, and you will get the beautiful stuff. So I've taken that with me since then, and I think it's good. Somebody told me that's Zen. I don't know what it is. But I really love the idea. If we set out to do the great things, we probably won't achieve them. If we set out to make an environment where great things will happen, we're going to get great things. We just don't know what they are yet. I think I've covered enough stuff for one talk. And I assume we're still within the time period that we had. I did write some of this stuff down, but I just want to say thank you, and you'll have to help me pronounce it correctly. How do I say that? Dziękuję bardzo. Close? Thank you very, very much.
Okay, dziękuję bardzo, Woody. So you still have a chance to ask a question. I'm going to ask the question if this squirrel is kind of somehow related to this Ice Age movie series we used to watch. This one?
That movie wasn't around then, so I don't know.
I have more of a statement first on my list. So this is Wood is on Fire. You want to comment on this one?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the next one is more a question to the organizers. Why did you keep such a great talk to the very end of the conference? So here's the comment from my side. We get this one recorded. It's going to be soon on YouTube. So basically, if you follow AgileByExample conference on YouTube, you will find those videos. And there's also a video with you from 2020 pandemic/online conference, so you can watch this one.
Was that the same talk?
I hope it is not, but
okay.
You know, that was 4 years ago, so I'm not sure neither. So you can watch them, you know, week after week. So you're gonna forget this anyways, right? We remember only 10% from each, so there's gonna be 20% anyway. This is what I get. Okay, I get a question. I believe there is a question mark in this one. Is there a first thing to do when trying to turn up the good on collaboration? By the way, your wise drawings are awesome. This is not a question.
So I'm going to comment on the drawings first. Somebody came up to me and said, I love your talks. I want to become a speaker. What do? I said, find a spouse who's a great artist and use their work in your talks. And then everybody will think you're really good, even if you're not. So that's easy advice to follow. Just find a good artist to marry, and that should help. And I admire her art, and I'm so lucky that she lets me use it. She writes children's books. It's the only reason I travel around the world is to advertise her children's books. So the other question was turning up the good on collaboration. If I'm going to give any kind of suggestion, it's find some people who are also interested in doing that. Find the volunteers, the ones who are ready to give it a try. I would never force anybody to work that way. We need to find people who are ready to work that way. And then we can get a chance at success. And almost everywhere I've worked, even way before I started working this way full time, we would find some people who want to get together at lunch, and I'm going back, to 2005 and before that, and experiment with refactoring and other things, and we would do it as a team. And we're learning to work together while we're also learning some technical things. And this should include more than just some programmers. Was that helpful?
For me, yes. I don't know for
Okay.
those people.
Well, they can shout it
I
out.
don't see them anyway. Sorry, this is about the light. It's not about you. And probably we can go into the advertising part of the talk, so where we can go get those books for our children.
Oh, do you have Amazon here?
Yes, we do.
So I don't know. It probably costs a fortune to ship across the ocean, but I know they're for sale. In the U.S., just about anywhere. If you have children, if you do not have children, that's a starting spot. Get some children.
We're gonna get this presentation soon. Sorry. Okay. How do you do it remotely? This is about the pair programming, more programming, by the way.
It's very easy to do remotely. It's not much different than all sitting together. We started doing remote when we called it mob programming. I think in 2012, we had somebody on the team that had to work from home for medical reasons for a little while. And so we just set things up so we could have a monitor with their face there. The main thing, if you're going to work in a hybrid way, which I think is harder, is you need to make sure that you make it equal. The people who are here and the person who's remote is equally involved. That's one of the things we learned. But if everybody's remote, it's pretty straightforward. I do have a suggestion. You get some kind of remote system like AnyDesk or a TeamViewer. So do we get paid for any plug that we make like that? So that's some software you could buy that makes it pretty easy to work as a team. But some people just use Zoom, and they use, there's a site called remotemobprogramming.org that gives suggestions on how you can do the handoffs. So we can maybe next year when you invite me back, we'll do a whole session about remote work this way. But it's straightforward, and there's many teams doing it. Our original team at Hunter, where we started this, for us, they're all working remotely now. It's very straightforward.
Okay, feel invited. If anyone has a concern about inviting, just checking. Do you want to invite Woody to next year? All right, you're invited.
Thank you.
So a few more questions coming in. What can you say about teams? Are we really work as a bunch of individuals? How to change it permanently?
The team can figure that out. The team will figure out. We need to liberate them. Not everybody will work this way. This isn't for everyone. It's just that there's always a way to get better than what we currently have. We had several people on our original team that were very resistant to pair programming. And then the week we started working as a team all day in front of the same computer, they almost immediately started working with us as a team. I think, for one thing, they could see that everyone else was loving it, and they wanted to learn how to love it. But I think you got to make it by invitation. Who wants to try it? And there's no way to force this. And it's not necessarily the best way to work. It's just another alternative. We can have pair programming. We can have solo programming. We can have team programming. But all the work that we do requires some kind of collaboration. So even when we're solo working and we send an email to someone, we're collaborating with them. So let's learn how to make our collaborations better. One thing I suggest is if you start on something solo and you need to talk with someone else, it's telling you probably should be working together. That we put a lot of blocks in the way. We put a lot of difficulties in our way to keep that from happening. And we come up with excuses. Oh, they're too busy. Well, why are we allowing people to be too busy? There's lots to this. We can't cover it all in one session.
Okay, thank you very much. A few more are coming, so I'm going to cut.
We only have time for maybe 100 more questions.
That's cool. So. Okay, so I'm going to sit. How do you make all the people in the picture pay attention to the things at hand all at once with just one person interacting? Nobody zooming out?
So the person at the computer, we had a guideline. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it has to go through someone else's hands. Things are moving so quickly that if you're not paying at least, I would say, sufficient attention, it doesn't have to be complete focus. When it's your turn to help, you might not notice that you had an idea that could have helped. So you have to pay enough attention to do that. But this is a very gentle and relaxing way to work if you get good at it. So this is the thing I would mention. If people feel under pressure or stressed doing this, we probably need to do a lot of reflection on why are we allowing it to be stressful. Let's make it easy and relaxed. We found, after the first few weeks of doing this, we accidentally stumbled upon it. But we've been practicing learning together, and that practicing learning together turned into working together. But we found after the first 2 or 3 weeks that we would, at the end of the day, we go, we didn't get much done today. And then we'd look at what we actually got done, and it was way more than we used to be getting done. It just didn't feel like we were. There's a psychological thing about motion. If we're not really running hard, we don't feel like we're working. And we were getting more done and having fun, being relaxed, being sustainable. These are things worth striving for.
Okay, thank you. So the next one, can we just get together and code without all the talk about system thinking, communication, and depressing stuff?
No, you have to do all this. No, this was just me. So I'm just trying to explain where my brain was at when we started working this way. I knew that collaboration's good. I was being hired to manage a team, and I didn't want to manage them. I wanted them to learn to manage themselves. But you don't need to know all this to just start working this way. But those of you who are trying to get a better understanding of it, this might be helpful. It just gives me a way of thinking about it, and maybe it will extend into giving you a few ideas on what's important to you. But you don't need to know about all that other stuff. No.
Thank you. I'm going to close with this one. It can take longer than a few minutes to answer anyway. So what is the future for agile people?
Yeah, they're doomed. They're doomed.
The squirrels, hunting for squirrels?
Up. I wanted to show the last slide.
Okay, can we see the slide again?
Yeah, can we put the slides up?
Gentlemen, can we put the slides again? Okay, we have interaction, communication
That's okay.
happening.
They're figuring it out. We'll make it go. How's that? This is what I notice when I go to Agile conferences. There's a whole bunch of shepherds, and there aren't any sheep. Everybody here's like itching to explain something to somebody and to guide them. They want to guide somebody, but there's nobody here to guide because it's all a bunch of shepherds. So the world still needs shepherds. I don't think we need to become managers. I don't think we need to. If the jobs are disappearing, that's a puzzling thing to me. But I don't think going back to the old ways is going to work. And there's a lot of people doing that. I'm not sure that's really, so these things will go in cycles. But I put this picture in just because I was trying to think, where could I use it? And now, thank you. You gave me an opportunity to use it. So this is called Bo Peep and Eric. And I think it's kind of the beginning of an idea of a story my wife might write. But there you go. I don't know. How could I know? If I was right now just trying to make my living in a company guiding agile practices and things like that, I might have to do a little more research into that. You probably will find better ways. The future will unfold, and you'll be great. That's the way the world works. Yeah, you'll do well.
All right. Wood is staying till Friday in Warsaw. So if you have any question, you can catch him, get him for pierogi, get him for Polish food. He said he want to try Polish food. You can also ask him to invite him to your office as well. So he's happy to do the work with your team. And once again, let's thank Zuill.
Thank you.